All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the final entry in the 2024 Tomales Regional History Center Lecture Series. I want to make special mention, thank you to Catherine Lemieux for letting us use her art prodigiously in different places in promoting this. So thank you, Jen. And if you haven't been to the History Center, we have a new exhibit. Jenny Megan made one about the history of the town hall, and it moves slower than I do and maybe more factual, I don't know. So go and check that out, and thank you to her for doing the hard work of building an exhibit. That's really a lot of effort. So this picture was taken in 1900, and if you we have the whole long version of it in the back. The History Center, Catherine Lemieux did a lot of work to make a beautiful version of it. So if you haven't up close and personal looked at that, it's worth a peek. It was taken in 1900, and you can see, of course, the town hall is exactly in the center of town where it belongs, not here on the outskirts somehow. The Tomales Town Hall is one of, if not the oldest, continuously used community centers in California. It's the continuous use and community center parts that maybe set us apart from other places that have existed. We're not even the oldest building on this block, so it's not necessarily just the longevity of the pieces of wood and that sort of thing, but all of the other parts that go into making us the living room of Tomales, the place where we entertain and engage the community. But also it's a living room in another sense, in that it's still alive in our community. It's not, the windows aren't boarded up. We're not a museum of some sort. We're a place where we actively get together and do stuff like this, like drink champagne and dance all night. So, and that is not an accident, and it's a big part of why we are still here 150 years later. We want to acknowledge to start that Tomales and the town hall are on the unceded ancestral lands of the Coast Miwok people. They lived here since time immemorial. Their village of Atumwe is roughly where Tomales stands today. And in fact, the name Tomales comes from Coast Miwok, the Tamaliwa people. The Spanish corrupted that, I think, into the word tamales. Hello, friend. The Spanish land grant here was the Bolsa de Tomales. And in a History Center talk last year, Dewey Livingston noted that often historians, I'm not one, begin by acknowledging indigenous communities, and then they kind of move along and talk about European settlement and stuff, never to return. But one thing he went on to note was that the Coast Miwok people never went away from our community, and they remained and remain an important part of our community of Tomales, and there are many, the fabric of life here, and in the history of this hall, as a matter of fact. So there are many families associated with Tomales that have Miwok ancestry, and I believe our first talk in the lecture series this coming year will be by members of the Federated Indians of Great and Rancheria, talking about the history of the Miwok people in this area. That said, now I'm going to turn to European settlement. So the Tomales Town Hall was built in 1874. So a little overview of what life was like in 1874. The President of the United States was Ulysses Grant. And the population of the entire United States was 38 million people, most of whom were east of the Mississippi River. For comparison, California today is 39 million people. California had about 560,000 people. For comparison, that's about San Francisco-ish, maybe a little more than San Francisco. The light bulb is 4 years in the future. Travel in Marin County is by walking or by riding on a horse, so it's hay-powered. The Burbank potato is 1 year old, so is a foreign country, they say. You know, they do things differently there. Things were different in 1874. Tomales' European settlement begins a little bit earlier, 20 years earlier, partly with this guy, John Keyes. He's an Irishman who comes as a 49er and does not make his fortune digging gold. He makes his fortune growing the bodega red potato. And his idea is that he's going to ship potatoes to San Francisco from where Tomales is, and he stakes a claim with a partner, and he buys a schooner named the Spray, and he builds a warehouse, and he starts to ship potatoes to San Francisco. The picture on the left here is a boat called the Nettie Low, which is very similar to what the Spray would have looked like. This one served on Drake's Bay rather than on Tomales Bay. But there were a lot of these little two-masty schooner things that plied the waters between our part of the coast and San Francisco. Warren Dutton was another 49er. He arrived in Tomales in 1852. Keyes' first partner goes away, and Dutton takes up building a trading post in like Keyes' little shanty building. He and Keyes don't really get on. In fact, Keyes had him arrested at one point. So their partnership did not last, and Dutton staked out claims up here in what we now call Upper Town, the main part of where Tomales is today. Their falling out means that he was free to build a store here, and he built his own fleet of schooners and so forth, and they competed with each other in the early history of Tomales. During the 1850s, other entrepreneurs also were launching schooners, and if you left right now, you might get to San Francisco in time for dinner, or you might get there Tuesday. It all depends on, these are sailing craft. It depends on the fog and the wind as to how fast you're going to go. The return journey wasn't empty. They would bring goods to sell to ranchers and farmers and other people who were settling in this area. In this way, Tomales was connected to San Francisco in larger trading areas that otherwise you'd have to drag things in a wagon with a horse, and that is that's a different speed altogether. There's a painting of Keyes' original wharf with the Spray in the foreground. Keyes' wharf was on a knoll where the estuary forked, and this is the map that we often show, the west and eastern forks of the Keyes estuary. Today, these are nice meadow-like areas, and they're inhabited by Ted Hall's very attractive Highland cows. So they're no longer navigable. You can still see these areas today, and if you drive down on Highway 1, just going out of town, and there's a curve down there, and you can park and look back, and you can see this is the bluff that painting was of, where Keyes' wharf was. And if you look to the left, you can see where the left fork of the estuary was, where most of Dutton's buildings ended up. And you can see the right fork goes along, and when it rains really hard in the winter, still submerges Highway 1 at that point, so like it did this past winter. To give you a little different perspective, in 1868, this is Keyes' warehouse, which is sort of behind where the Dillon Beach rental place is. This huge warehouse was back there, and it fronted to a wharf where you could load boats to sail off to San Francisco. So that gives you some idea. So what kind of town was Tomales in 1874? I went back and looked at the 1870 and also the 1930 census records, and it's really interesting. There are 1,110 people listed in Tomales, Marin County. Now you're sitting there thinking, 1,100 people in Tomales? Not exactly, because the area that was called Tomales Township actually engaged a much larger area. It reached all the way to the Sonoma County border in the north, in east to encompass most of the Two Rock Valley, but not Two Rock, because that's in Sonoma County. South to Ocean Roar, where the water comes in to the estuary. And then also on the east side, all of the Chileno Valley, maybe as far as the Laguna School District. If you know the Laguna School, the Little Laguna School, that's in Tomales from the point of view of the census of 1870. So that's 1,100 people, 150 of whom are Coast Miwok, 300 of whom are Chinese immigrants. Now, the story always is they came to build the railroad. There was no railroad in 1870. There was no idea of a railroad in 1870. They're working in agriculture. So that's part of, and we have the Chinese Exclusion Act later and other events. So there's a quarter of the population is Chinese in 1870. Here's a page that has Warren Dutton on it, and I actually went page through all this. It's like fascinating stuff. Tomales' life as a port was limited. We have cows walking around on it today. They had the same sort of problem developing in the 1870s. That is, it was silting up. And so it was clearly not going to be the long-term solution to shipping potatoes to San Francisco. So the development of the area went towards the railroad, and the railroad did come in the middle 1870s. This is a picture of the train in 1896 running along the estuary, and you can see the estuary probably not being navigated at that point. So the port and later the railroad greatly influenced the development of the region. As I mentioned before, you know, there's, you know, you get to San Francisco. And by 1870, the famous letter ranches of Point Reyes are in operation and are shipping butter to San Francisco. There were twice as many dairies in Tomales as there were on Point Reyes. There were 49 dairies in Tomales. And by 1880, they're producing 1.2 million pounds of butter a year. And when you go, well, what's that work out to? That works out to be 65 pounds of butter per dairy per day. So not an unreasonable amount. These are small dairies for the most part. Why butter? Pasteurization was invented in 1864, had not reached us. And refrigeration definitely had not reached us. And so milk spoils almost immediately when you take it out of the cow under those conditions. You can make cheese, but cheese is much more labor intensive than butter. So what would happen is they would milk the cows and they would put the milk in pans, and then they would skim the cream off the top. That's where skim milk comes from, right? And the stuff they pull off, they would turn into butter. And butter is much less labor intensive than cheese, and you could ship it reliably, quickly to San Francisco. You could make money and not have to go through all of that cheese making stuff. This is not to say we did not make cheese. James Fallon is with a 850-pound block of cheese here. So, but you know, this is what a dairy might have looked like. You know, 20, 30 cows, hand milked to make butter to fund a family. In 1874, Tomales is about 20 years old. It's been a port town. Now it's a railhead and a market town in a growing agricultural region, and it's one other thing. It's a hard drinking town. Between 1860 and 1920, there are continuously between 6 and 8 saloons in Tomales at all times, including Johnson's, the Sunnyside, the Bordessa place. You can still see its back in the back. I think it still says saloon on it. Not anymore. He painted it. Maybe we can revive the sign. It's there was a lovely named Relief Saloon, and of course the William Tell House. What happened in 1920? Prohibition. And so we had 0 saloons for a period of time, and only the William Tell came back after Prohibition. Ironically, the only place you can get a drink in town today is right here in the town hall. Now, why is this ironic? Well, as with many communities in the late 18th and early 20th century, there was a temperance movement in Tomales, and Warren Dutton was a teetotaler. John Keyes was not a teetotaler. There's some disagreement between those guys. Anyway, he donated the land and some money, and there were volunteers, and they came to build a building for the Tomales Temperance Social Club. The Temperance Social Club part did not last very long, I'm given to understand. But the deed for the property has been held by trustees ever since then. And you're in this hall today. This is the building that they built in 1874. The cost of the building in 1874 was $1,400, slightly less than it would cost to replace today. That's about $40,000 in today's money, still slightly less than it would cost to replace today. And everything was done by volunteers. And it's really interesting if you look at a picture in 1873, just before the building was built, and then you look at a picture of the east side of Main Street today, all the houses are the same. So as I mentioned, this is not even the oldest building on this block. All of the buildings on this block are older than the town hall. So that is not our claim to fame in Tomales. The original hall was about 12 feet shorter than today's building. It's a single story, very simple looking from the front. Looks sort of like a barn. We had a little experience building barns. There's no electricity, there's no indoor plumbing. Lighting was probably by oil lamp at that time. So you come up through 7 wooden stairs, and there would have been double doors in the back right about where the Tomales Branch Library sign was, and you walk right into this room. And that was the town hall, this room and this stage here. The exterior might have been simple and rustic, but you would recognize this room at that time. The curved ceiling, the chair rail, the windows, the stage, all of the details here are pretty much the same as they were in 1874. This is the earliest interior picture that I'm aware of, is a refugee sewing bee for the 1906 earthquake. You can see the lamps have been lowered so they can light them. We are lucky that, unlike much of the town, this side of the street is never burned to the ground because open flame in a wooden building. So, according to local lore, the first real party was not until January 7th of 1875 with the arrival of the railroad. There were 300 people on the first train, which is maybe the population of the village itself at that time. And they claimed that 1,000 people were greeting them, standing on the tops of hills, waving flags. They have bands. The train pulls into the station, and Warren Dutton greets everybody, throws open the doors to his warehouse where a big spread of food is out. It's January. They're all drinking coffee because it is a cold day. And also, Warren Dutton's a teetotaler. There were speeches made, and then everyone decamped to the saloons. There was a famous brawl on the corner of Dillon Beach Road and Main Street in front of the Continental Hotel. But the culmination of the day was a grand ball that lasted all the way until dawn here in what was then called the Tomales Public Hall. From there, the hall becomes part of the fabric of Tomales life. It's at the start, end, and sometimes both ends of civic events. We have frequent shows. For example, we had a lot of vaudeville shows in the early 1900s and the 1920s. There might be games. The article on the right says in part, 61 tables of cards were played and 50 prizes awarded. After the games, refreshments were served and dancing followed, which lasted until 2:00 a.m. So our forebears were slowing down when they were gambling. We were the local cinema sometimes. We showed local films here in the 1920s, silent films. Here are just a few that featured in 1926. Holidays were, and still are, celebrated here. The stage was sometimes home to local theater productions. George tells me this picture is actually of the high school stage, so I don't have a picture of people being dramatic on this stage, but civic groups met here and meet here still and use this space. The History Center, for example, long used the space for tea and fashion shows. One group that was here a lot were the Druids. For over 100 years, they met continuously here, and they were only put off by COVID to keep from coming back. This is Romeo Sereni's reminder card for August of 1932. But we see, for example, this is an advertisement for 1892 to come to the Druids Hall for a dance. They still have the peephole in the left door. The door is open so you can't see it, so I have a picture here of the peephole so that you could check to see if that's actually a Druid or you should be hung from the Buckeye tree outside, I guess. Every manner of personal celebrations, weddings, birthdays, wakes, what have you, have been celebrated here. In time of war, we served the draft board and as a sign-up place for servicemen. And of course, there was dancing. Dances were generally held, in the early days, were held on alternating Saturday nights. We alternated with the Bloomfield Town Hall. They have not been as active as we are anymore, but dances used to last until dawn so the ranch hands could go directly from dancing to milking. And progress kept coming. So when the hall was about 60 years old, and here's a picture of 1928, they finally paved Main Street. So, hall's getting to be 60 years old. On the west side of Main Street, you can see there's electric power lines. On the east side, there's telephone lines. We're, the modern world is starting to happen. And people were starting to say, well, that old hall, maybe it's outlived its day, it's gone beyond its moment, it's outlived its usefulness. But the trustees at the time made a different decision. And they made a different decision in large part because of this guy on the left here, Mr. Romeo Serini. He was the chair of the Town Hall Committee of the Farm Center, who at that time were managing the trusteeship for the hall. And I want to kind of do a little digression about Romeo Serini. He only passed in 1981, so a number of you in the audience may have known him. To me, he's just a historical figure, but that's not true to all of you, I know. He's interesting to me because, like many local immigrants, he's a Swiss-Italian immigrant from a region called Valmagia. Very many people came here from that area during the late 1800s, early 1900s, and he came in 1901. And here's a picture of him with his brothers Isidore, Arcangelo, and Giocondo around 1910 in Tomales when the last of them had immigrated to this country. He immigrated here in 1901. He was born in 1888. Do the math. That means he was 13 years old when he immigrated to this country. He went on to be a World War I veteran and then later to be a rancher, and he owned, and his family owned the ranch down here where the estuary is and the Keys property had been, and so on, where Keys Grove and so on were. So there's a continuity there that's interesting. I mentioned before that Tomales had twice the number of dairymen as Point Reyes. In the late 1800s, those Swiss-Italian immigrants are coming, one at a time, working as ranch hands until they can go, that's not me, right? Whew. Until they can go out on their own. And they're proud of their Swiss heritage, and so they begin to hold little celebrations. Now, I looked this thing up, and Wikipedia says that the founding of the Swiss Confederacy was celebrated in Switzerland first in 1891. And it hasn't been an official holiday in Switzerland until 1994. Keep that date in mind. Tomales has been celebrating the Swiss National Day since 1889. So we were proud of the Swiss heritage here. And these were big events. I mean, they drew from all over the region to come. The town hall served as the headquarters, and there would be a parade down Main Street to the Keys Grove, and then there would be speeches and dramatic readings. I suppose William Tell was featured a lot. And then they would come back and have they'd have a big picnic, and they'd come back and have a grand ball here in the hall. This is the ad for the 1901 version of the event. Notice that the Tomales Town Hall it's probably too small to read, but it's newly refitted for this occasion. This is a theme we'll see as we go through this. The town hall trustees refitting and refurbishing the hall as we go to meet different needs. Now think about it. In 1901, Romeo Serini has just immigrated. He's a 13-year-old guy, and he's probably marching in the Swiss National Day Parade down Main Street to Keys Grove. So that's kind of an interesting thing. So that tradition goes on for, I think, 105 years, something like that. Here are pictures from the 1920s to give you some perspective. Lots of cars start to jam Main Street for this. Until finally in 1994, the Swiss start to celebrate this thing annually. We gave up on it. It had somehow become the Italian festival over the years. And in that year, the Swiss parade, the Italian parade became Founders Day, organized by locals to continue the tradition of having a celebration on the Labor Day weekend. And we did continue to have parades until the highway patrol got a little testy about us closing the highway. Today it's called Tomales Fest in recognition of the need to be more inclusive. We don't just have Founders because we have many other kinds of people contributed to what Tomales is and our culture and our heritage. So, Romeo Serini is the head of the trustees in 1930, and they're looking at the town hall going, maybe it's obsolete. He's gone, I found a guy who will do the renovation for $3,300, and instead of getting an all-new Art Deco modern building, we preserved the hall that we had, and we did some things to add on to it. They dug underneath it about what is it, 30 or so feet back to form what is now the downstairs, poured concrete to form our downstairs area, built the front space on the additional 12 or 15 feet of building off of the front of the building. And here you can see them, they've dug under it and are preparing to pour the concrete, and they're framing the front. Here's a side view of them building that front section. And you can see that we have a little inset picture here. Up in the attic there, the front of the old building is still on there, just as a remnant, a ghost of what was. Because the new front is in this sort of stucco Italianate style that was kind of popular at the time. The Farm Center's minutes say Mr. Serini and Mr. Contini reported the total cost is $3,973.71 with a deficit of $810.23, which they made up quickly with donations and other activities. So the equivalent of spending about $70,000 to renovate the hall. Notice the doors and the windows on the front right of the building. They're not there anymore today, but they were the Tomales Branch Library. If you've ever wondered if that sign in the back is kind of weathered or what, no, that's the original look of the sign. This is Irvin Jensen on his horse in 1934, sitting in front of the library. Unfortunately, the library went out in the 1970s, and we got a kitchen instead. So that's the change there. A thing to keep in mind is that the Tomales Town Hall is not the town hall as in like we have a mayor or something. The Tomales Town Hall is not a government anything and never has been. It's always been held by trustees who are volunteers from the community for the benefit of Tomales and the Tomales region. So our service area extends now into portions of Sonoma County at times, Valley Forge and Bloomfield and such, but much of that same Tomales Township area we looked at before is our service area where people can come and use the hall for different things. And in 1972, Marin County wanted to determine whether the hall should be turned over to the county. And the proposal was maybe we shouldn't pay taxes for 5 years. And that received more support than turning the hall over to the county for some reason. So, but in any case, it's always been maintained by individuals in the community. That's a blessing, but it's also a challenge in many ways as well. So in the 70s, we continue to see the pattern that we've seen before. The interior was painted for the bicentennial, red, white, and blue. You can see that over the years, we've done things with lights. So at that time, we had fluorescent lights, and I understand we had a huge, loud, annoying heater in the back that hung from the ceiling that thankfully we've replaced more recently than that. And we see this kind of pattern in the 70s and early 80s where there's an appeal from the trustees to support the hall. In 1 year, for example, the costs were $1,147, and we made $648 in rentals that year. And so we were canvassing the community for support to keep the hall going. If we zoom out a little bit, this center section, you can see Romeo Serini telling the story of the hall. And you can also see some of the trustee names, and those names change over time. I'll name this particular set, and we'll see another particular set just a couple of years later. So Frank Tamba, Betty Duncan, William Souza, Al Pancha, and Richard Adams were the trustees at that moment in time. Every 10 or 20 years, each generation basically, throughout the history, volunteers have come forward to act as trustees, and also the town members have volunteered time and money and materials to renovate, extend, maintain the hall as something that we can use. And generally, we did the work. That's not always possible anymore, but we did all of the work ourselves as well. In the mid-'80s, one of the things the trustees realized is that just being some community organization was not sufficient. We were unable to tap things like nonprofit grants for nonprofits, either governmental grants or from public sources and so on. And so we became incorporated as a nonprofit corporation in 1986. Those trustees were William Crane, who's memorialized on the back wall there. He gave 30 years of service to this hall, so we thank him, although he's passed. Frank Tamba, Virginia Jensen, Eleanor Conroy, Bill Bedini, and Bert Cruz were at that time the trustees, and they bequeathed to us the organizational structure that we still use today as a nonprofit organization. In '91, we received a historic marker from the Native Sons of the Golden West. You could question some details. The actual reconstruction on the front was 31, right? Not 1906. I don't think we fell down. In the early 2000s came the most recent set of efforts, so a generation ago, 20 years ago. The Buckeye lot was purchased, and separately we did a major renovation. We dug some drainage, we renovated the stage and the interior here. We got rid of the red, white, and blue paint. We have this beautiful paint job and beautiful lighting. We have a hydronic heat system and so forth. So a lot of work, the foundations were replaced on this end of the building. So a lot of work went in to improve the hall and this section for the future. And as with other efforts, the town funded that. The loan to repurchase the Buckeye lot was repaid in months. Volunteers did very much of the rebuilding work at that time. The town hall continues today, owned and maintained and operated by the community, for the community. We're your hall. And we're very glad to be able to celebrate 150 years of that. And with that, I get to turn it over to our current board president, John Tornes.
I told Addison that I learned quite a bit myself from watching it while we practice. So thank you for sharing all that. Addison, it's very informative. Well, you took us on a journey over the past 150 years of our beloved town hall. So where does this journey bring us today? We are proud of the fact that we are one of the longest continuously operating community centers in the state of California. And the collection of communities that we have been serving has not changed over that period. We serve those residing on ranches and in villages surrounding Tomales, and from Two Rock to Dillon Beach, Marshall, up to Valley Ford and Bloomfield. We are the families that have lived here for 7 generations, from the homesteaders to recent arrivals, the young and the old, the ranchers and the oystermen, farmers and remote workers, and the local business people that serve this community. We have folks in the audience today who are descendants of those who built, improved, and managed this hall over the past 150 years. We are the living room of this community, a place to gather for all of life's events, including christenings, quinceañeras, bar, bat, and bond mitzvahs, weddings, birthdays, retirements, and memorials. And now for a little audience participation. Who in this audience held their wedding ceremony in the hall? If you were married in this hall, please stand and remain standing. We have 2 back there, and a couple over there. Thank you all, and congratulations to our guests. And one of those couples, Suzanne and Frank, who are standing over here in the middle, are actually celebrating their anniversary this week, and they brought cake for everybody. So thank you. In addition to providing a venue for celebrations of life's events, the hall now hosts regular ongoing civics events, such as meetings of the hall's trustees, our Village Community Services District, disaster preparedness meetings, design review board, and meetings with our county supervisor, one of whom is in the audience today and will be presenting us with a recognition later. Thank you, Dennis, for coming today. We act as a gathering place for other organizations, such as our partner in today's event, the Tomales Regional History Center, as well as the Federated Indians of the Great Rancheria, Marin Agricultural Land Trust, the West Marin Fund, West Marin Community Services, West Marin Senior Services, and the Oceana Marin Association. In the area of community wellness, the hall hosts the San Francisco Marin Food Bank's weekly Thursday food pantry, periodic. Board member Denise sitting over there by the window who coordinates that. We have periodic health and legal aid clinics, monthly osteopathic clinics, thrice weekly yoga classes led by our citizen Benta across the street, and periodic dance classes. We lease the hall out to the community and beyond to help offset the operation costs of the hall. But this just keeps the doors open and none of the essential needs of the hall to make it fully accessible and functional for our community into the future. At the end of this presentation, we invite you to see the basement of our hall and the current kitchen, which we hope to replace with a commercial kitchen, which we have mocked up for you downstairs. Not only will that allow for us to have higher revenue bookings, it will allow us to remain open in a local emergency and not be shut down by the county as a neighboring community center was during the 2018 fires. It will also allow for our local food entrepreneurs to legally produce food in our kitchen for the community and to host pop-up suppers. In the area of entertainment, the hall hosts monthly open mic nights led by our good citizen Dawn, and every second Thursday evenings at 7, you can come and see some great local musicians and writers. We also host periodic jazz, rock, and country music concerts, barn dances, and parties such as our upcoming Halloween party, which Mercy is coordinating. That's going to be also at 7 o'clock, just in 2 weeks from last night on Saturday, October 26th, so mark your calendars. And don't forget our beloved annual holiday cheer community potluck is always held on the first Friday in December. This year on December 6th, but we're starting it earlier at 5 p.m. because of the light conditions, and some folks like to retire earlier, so I'm at 5 on the 6th of December. And please don't forget our wonderful Paris and Tomales dinner dance on February 22nd, also a creation of Denise's. It's a wonderful event, February 22nd. But the hall doesn't run itself. We would like to acknowledge those who made this hall possible. Would the current Board of Trustees for the hall please stand? Would any former hall trustees stand and join them? Would anyone who has ever volunteered at the hall work party please stand? And would anyone who has volunteered to help the hall in any capacity please stand? Thank you to all of those who have given their time to help with running our hall. Thank you so much. Finally, and just as important, we rely on donations. This is the lifeblood of our organization. Without you, this would not be possible. I invite any of you who have ever donated to the hall to please stand and be acknowledged. If you are not already on our event newsletter, we invite you to sign in at the welcome table at the door. We have a sign-up sheet there. For those who would like to support the hall going forward, we would invite you to think of us in your year-end donations, in your annual required minimum distributions, and also to think of us in your estate. So with that, taking you to the present, I would like to take you to the future with our young Mercy Copeland, the most recent addition to the Board of Trustees.
Hi, everyone. So excited to meet with you today. It's an honor to be up here. Thank you, Addison and John, for sharing the worlds of the previous and current generations. And I'm excited to take you guys to the future. So old buildings embody history. They are worlds. In old buildings, we glimpse the world of previous generations. As we look forward to the future of the hall, we aim to preserve these worlds as a connection to those that came before us. We will do so through our rejuvenation plan. We have chosen this word, rejuvenation, for its figurative connotation to make young again. As Addison mentioned, today's rejuvenation project began in the early 21st century when the hall's trustees had the opportunity to purchase the adjoining lot. We will continue to build on this plan, starting with phase 1. Here we see a conceptual rendering showing a complete reconstruction of the front facade with a new double stair and garden gate. In the next conceptual rendering, we see the potential for usage of the Buckeye lot. Our ownership affords us the opportunity to install a patio and to create convenient access from the basement level to the lot. Phase 1 will also include large windows and glazed doors, bringing warm southern light into the dark, low-ceilinged space, and finally providing long-needed access to the patio. These improvements will give us opportunities for using the basement and the outdoor space in so many new ways. This is especially necessary as our ongoing programs during Phase 2, the upper hall will become a temporary focus of construction. Here, we can welcome locals as well as support elevated event rentals, allowing us to focus on quality over quantity. Here, we can imagine an updated communal kitchen that can serve local entrepreneurs and guest chefs for pop-ups, as well as serve our community in times of need, as the current state of our kitchen is not up to standard in order to serve as a community shelter in the event of an emergency. You may have noticed in the updated plans, the kitchen moves from the front right corner to the back left corner. This opens up the current space the kitchen occupies for a casual lounge. With lighting coming in from the Buckeye lot, this serves as a comfortable gathering place during community events. Some work invites you into itself, not offering a finished, glossy, one reading only surface. This is what makes old buildings interesting to me. I think that humans have a taste for things that not only show that they have been through a process of evolution, but also show that they are still part of one. They are not dead yet. This quote expresses the physical characteristics of the Tomales Town Hall and alludes to some of the many things that we all treasure about this space. The peephole in the anteroom entry door used by the Druids, the girls' sign above the bathroom door, all connect us to neighbors long ago. Together, we bring the Tomales Town Hall, along with its history, its mission, and its inclusive traditions, into the 21st century, preserving it for generations to come.
Hi, I'm Anna Jensen. I've only been in Tomales. Okay, I've only been in Tomales since 1950, but my husband's family, the Joseph Urban and the Mads Jensen families, came to Tomales in the 1850s. We are now on our 7th generation. Wow. We also have 36 relatives buried in the Protestant cemetery and a few in the Catholic cemetery. All have been helped with this town. Alice Redding and some of our neighbors have been here longer than I have actually been here and grew up here. Tomales used to be called a one-horse town, as they say. One-horse town, my husband once rode his horse through the front doors of the William Tell. And Edith Benini, Bill Benini's grandmother, just said, "Urban, will you please take your horse outside?" Well, I'm sure she didn't say exactly that way. To the Tomales History Center, thank you for saving our past from being lost. Thank you to the Town Hall for keeping the town active and alive. Small towns lose their base without a center to hold it together. Long live Tomales and all these great folks, and please keep it together. Cheers.
Is it on? Yeah. Yes. Anyway, I think you saw and heard it all from the talks that we're doing, so everybody enjoy their champagne and a good time.
Thank you. Good.